So we're live. Awesome.
Hey.
So hi Olivia.
Hello, Jen.
We're here to discuss my favorite book right now,
There it
right?
is.
I have to tell you, I love this book. I love this book. I love this book. Literally, I was reading it. I would be sitting here laughing out loud, and people are like, "What is wrong with this girl?" Um, So I do want to attempt to do this conversation without giving away all the things that I found
Sure.
so wonderful about the book, but I will try to do that.
All
But
right.
let's talk about Panther in the Hive. I'm here with Olivia Cole, author of Panther in the Hive. And I do want to start off talking about just the writing industry and how it works and how you feel being a woman in the writing industry. So um, let's start with the basics, right? So you self-published this novel.
Yeah.
So was there a particular reason why you chose to do that? Because I'm reading it and I'm like, this is better than half the stuff I'm seeing on these major publishing
Uh,
companies. So I'm like, I'm wondering, was it a choice or, I mean, what's behind the self-publishing process
yeah.
for you?
Sure. A lot of things actually. You know, I think every writer at some point has that dream of, oh, I want to do it the traditional way and have an agent and Harper Collins and all those things. And I started off when I started writing the book, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do. But then the more I got into the book and kept writing it, I even before it was done, before I reached the, looking for a publisher stage, I was starting to have thoughts about self-publishing it. I was like, this is my book. And
Mhm.
I was reading more and more things, as I got older, it wasn't just about writing, it was about the business. And so I was reading more and more articles and stories from other writers that were, older than me and more experienced in the field who were, kind of dissatisfied with the way things were going, not just with the money they were making, but with the pressure that was put on the author. Less and less was being done by the publishing houses. This is from what I was hearing from my friends. They were saying, well, I thought that I would just write books, but no, I have to market, I have to do this, I have to get on social
Yeah.
media, and a lot of
Right.
them were not in on social media. They didn't want to do that. So, it was, I was like, well, why would I go with a publishing house who's going to take all, not all, but lots of the money, but
Hmm.
then I would still be the one responsible for, my own PR, and, I would get some stuff from them, but I would still be
Hmm.
responsible for all these things. So I was thinking about that. But then I wasn't ready to do that yet. I was like, that kind of felt like I hadn't met as many self-published people at that point. I hadn't talked to as many people who had done that or knew about it. So it kind of still had a stigma to it for me. So I, when I first, well, after I finished the book and then edited it and went through rounds and all that, I, reached out to a few agents. I talked to some editors. I went to a number of, book-related events and things like that.
Hmm.
And, people really loved the book, but they were, I don't want to name any names,
Yeah.
but they were resistant to the idea of a non-white heroine.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
Yeah, yep. You know where I'm going with this. They were saying, well, she doesn't seem as mainstream because
Wow.
she is a woman of color, and you know how I feel about that. So
Hmm.
I was like, well, no, why would I? Well, then you can't have it then. You're not having the book. Only one agent went so far as to suggest, say, I will take the book. I will feel more comfortable taking the book if you make her white. And I was
Wow.
like, eh, hold up, so that put a bad taste in my mouth. I was like, looking at the books that get so much of the mainstream attention and get, put on New York Times lists and all these things, they do represent a certain variety of the population.
Right.
And, and I wonder how many, I started, well, not started, I've been wondering, but, how many stories about the out of the norm, we're being neglected, we're being kind of hedged out, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So I was like, if I'm going to be asked to not only market my own stuff and do all these own things for myself, but then also I'd be worried about the character of my book and the character herself, the
Right.
heroine,
Right.
her personhood being kind of cut out for the sake of selling copies to white
Yeah.
readers. I was like, nah, I'm gonna do this myself. So long story short.
That's
Well, short
horrible.
story long.
That's sad. And I mean, it kind of leads into my next question because I wanted to ask you about the industry, right? So, you have this black heroine who we're going to talk about in a minute, but my husband, who's an inspiring author, so you have to ask her about the industry. Ask her about, these events where they have these books that are coming out, and it's basically white males who run these publishing houses, and then they have these events, and it's basically white males who are attending the events,
Yeah,
he basically told me like that's kind of the norm right now.
yeah.
And so my question to you is, being a woman, right, and then writing about a woman of color,
Mm.
do you feel like there's even a place for that in the industry as it stands today, or is that what you're trying to carve out for yourself?
I'm trying to carve it out. I think that's a good way to say it. I'm not going to say that there's not, women or people in general, writing characters, that are women and that are, not romance books or whatever. They definitely exist, of course, especially, you look at young adult books, Katniss Everdeen and all of these,
Right.
but then other books that I actually like that are, you know what I mean, books that I respect, whose authors I respect, Nnedi Okorafor,
Right.
who are writing very strong heroines. But then you look at, when I mention her in a literary discussion, and people are like, who? But but they know who like Lev Grossman is, and all these other
Right.
white male authors whose white male characters, are kind of the same as the author. They get all the spotlight. The
Right.
author and their white male characters are, getting that attention. So I don't want to go so far as to say that there's not a place for, that exists. I think that that place exists, but it's very small and it was reluctantly given.
Right.
So I'm not trying to carve it out because, people like Nettie have already, Miss Okorafor, I haven't met her, so I shouldn't call her by her first name. But, she's already carved it out, and I'm trying to get in there with her and make it bigger. I'm trying to,
Right.
body it a little bit. That's my goal, because I've gotten such positive feedback from the book that it's like people want to read these stories,
Yeah.
and I feel like the business, if you want, your husband wants me to talk about the business, so, I feel like the business of publishing isn't interested in diversity of stories. They're interested in dividends,
Yeah.
so they are still under the wrong impression, I would say, that white male stories or white female stories are the only ones that sell. And I just completely disagree. I don't think that's true, and I believe that opinion that they have means that they're out of touch with readers and our culture as a whole.
I agree. I agree. And I say that because I'm talking to obviously more and more people about the book, and they're buying it, right? So they're like, oh, I got it on my Kindle, and they're reading it like, oh my gosh, where has this been, right? And whenever this kind of stuff comes out, that's the first question people ask: where has
Yeah.
this been? Because
Mhm.
because people don't realize that they've been wanting to read this stuff until
Yeah.
they actually have it in hand. So,
Yeah.
so let's talk about the book itself. I'm not going to give anything away.
No
My husband's
spoilers.
actually my husband's still reading it, so I've had to tiptoe in my
Oh,
house. Yeah, it's tough.
that's tough. Yeah.
So let's talk about Tasha Lockett.
Mhm.
Okay, so we talked about her in our last interview, and I know she's based on friends and women that inspired you and things like that. But when
Mhm.
I was reading her, I'm like, this girl is so real. Like
Mhm.
she's the quintessential. She's a millennial. I know this is offensive, but she's a millennial, right?
Mhm.
And the way she speaks and the way she thinks, right? So you have us kind of walk through some of her thought processes. When she does things, she's basically, oh girl, that was dumb, right? The stuff we actually do, right?
Yeah.
But it's juxtaposed against this environment, this extreme post-apocalyptic environment. Oh my gosh, the doorman's trying to eat me. What do I do? Right? And I was reading it and I'm like, this is so interesting to me. And your writing style is not like anything that I've read before. So my question in terms of her character and how indignant she is, right? So she's
She is.
indignant. She's about it. She's
She
like,
is.
she's legit, right? So then my question to you is, was there a conscious decision? Did you say, I'm gonna make her legit? I'm not gonna water her down. I'm gonna leave her exactly how she is, how I imagine her, how my friends are, the women who have inspired me. Was that something you had to make a conscious decision about, or was she always gonna be that no matter what?
She was born that way. She was born that way. She's unique. She is a special girl, and there are things that she does. I think one of the reviews on Amazon that someone left said that you start off kind of hating her a little bit, and then sometimes you're jealous of her, and then you end up really respecting her journey,
Right.
And I feel like I kind of felt that way when I was writing Tasha Lockett,
Right.
In the beginning, I was like, she's just, I want her to have a journey of growth in more than one way, and,
Yeah.
and throughout that, she was just she just became, and I never had to add more to her, and I definitely didn't want to take anything away from her. That was, editing is always one of the hardest parts of writing, right? You
Right.
gotta kill your darlings and cut them out, and make your character. Sometimes they don't fit, they don't fit
Right.
on the page, and
Right.
they should be larger than life, but still got to fit on the page. So there were things about her experiences that she had that I did end up, kind of taking out. But I think that the weight of them remained. After the whole thing was done, it was much longer. But there was experiences she had that were, given light to. That the book saw that as you read, you would have experienced those things with her. But I ended up removing them because they were, some just were too long, or didn't move the story along for various reasons.
Yeah.
But I think the effect that those experiences had on her remained in her as a character, and I think that's what makes her so real, is because she has a life just like you and me. Like, we see each other on Google Plus, and we tweet at each other, and we
Yeah.
email. But so we see each other in this life, and then but there's also obviously parts of each other's lives that we don't see.
Right.
And but you still, when I talk to you, I still see the depth of that experience of your life. And I
Right.
think I try anyway for that to be the same for Tasha. You don't have to see her entire life to know she has one.
Right. Yeah.
But
It definitely came through. It definitely came through.
that's great.
So here's my other question. So Tasha's friends are like the anti-girl, right? They're like the non-sex in the city, right? They're all women of color, or the ones that
Hmm.
she likes, right? So
Hmm.
Dinah is Hispanic, right? And that is mixed race. I assume she's black, right?
Yeah.
And then Z is Asian of some sort, right? So she's also mixed race. She's Filipino and some other race.
Hmm.
So when I was reading that, I'm like, it was funny to me, obviously, as a woman of color whose friends are of diverse backgrounds. I was like, I
Hmm.
felt kind of refreshed by the fact that there were no white heroines. There were no,
Hmm.
white saviors in the book. There were no, oh, I have a white friend and she's in the room and she figures everything out for all of us. And, that's how a lot of stories are. Even if
It's
there
true.
is a person of color who is in the lead role, there's always a white person there to save them, right? There's always
Hmm.
a white person there to kind of make it better.
It's true. Yeah.
Um, and at each stage, every single person that Tasha interacts with who ends up sticking around in her life, they are not people they're not white. So
Hmm.
so so then my question for you, and they're all very different as well, which
Hmm.
I thought was really really good, right? You don't have any stereotypical women in the book at all. And so then
Right.
my question to you is, when setting up that narrative, right? Is that is that social commentary, or is that I'm just keeping it real with how women of color actually are, or is it a little bit of both?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Kind of like Tasha, they all just became. Dinah actually didn't get written in until the very last draft of the book.
Really?
Yeah, until the very last draft. And all of a sudden, I was like, where, what? She has to be here,
Yeah.
the book would not be the book without her now.
Yeah, I
Like,
couldn't
she,
imagine it without her.
had to have Dinah, and
Yeah.
you know, she, all of them are, you know, you know, it's hard to answer because, like, I don't, as you and I have talked about this. It's hard for me to write white characters sometimes, like especially as friends, like
Right.
because I have one white friend, I have one. So, it's hard for me sometimes to relate to writing that character as a friend. How
Right.
I don't know fully what it's like to have a white friend as an adult.
Right.
So writing Dinah, writing Vet, writing Z, it just was kind of, that's the way they are. That's
Right.
who they are. And you know, but it's also social commentary. I guess it kind of ends up being that way, whether I meant to or not, because white people are going to be like, there's no white people.
Yeah.
You know, somehow the
There's
absence.
one, right? There's one white friend.
There's one. Well, yeah, there is one white friend. Yes, right. But you know, it's interesting how, you know, I know that that is going to be something that is discussed a lot, but by white people, like, well, there's not any white, you know, major white characters, and it's like, but they don't notice when people of color are missing, you know, from their stories, you know, so it's
Right.
like suddenly you notice your own absence.
Right.
So, you know, I kind of wanted them to feel that a little bit, but also it just, that's the way the story unfolded. You know, this is the world that Tasha lives in, and these are her friends, and deal with it, you
And then
know?
hypothetically, obviously, because I over theorized the entire book. I'm like, oh, so this happens, and I'm like getting all scientific. Hypothetically, that actually works with the way that the post-apocalyptic era comes on. It would
Hmm.
make sense that the folks who are surviving are non-white, right?
Yes,
So,
yes,
so I was like, oh, you know, like it actually ties in with the story,
yes,
and it doesn't seem deliberate because that's kind of what happens.
yes. And that's funny that you said you're the only person that has said that so far, you know, that has read it, who has remarked on the fact that, you know, well, duh, people of color would be the ones
Right,
that are, you know,
right.
like, you know, the story did change, and, you know, I don't want to give too much away. I'm trying to, like, keep spoilers in my
Yeah.
mind, too. But, you know, it makes sense that, you know, the people that get the chip, you know, that have mink, that have access to mink, you
Yeah.
know, the people of color who would have access to mink are working, you know,
For
at
those people.
McDonald's and Walmart, you know,
Yeah.
corporations, you know,
Yeah.
or are, you know, soldiers.
Right.
So, you know, everyone else, you know, like they don't have, they're not given access, they're not being given access to the
Right.
kind of jobs that would provide mink. So, yeah, you know,
Right.
they're going to be left, you know.
Right.
So, and then you think about, you know, at least in current day, you know, how communities of color have this very well earned right to mistrust, you know, the
Yeah.
government and
Yeah.
healthcare and police. So they, of course, they would stay farther away from something
Right.
that being planted in my neck. What, you know?
Right.
So that I feel like that there's, you know, a kind of a line of reality there also.
Right. Right. And that was, I think while reading it, I think that was the part that I actually enjoyed. After obviously I've been reading your stuff on Huffington Post, and I know you, so I've been kind of following you, and it was refreshing to get that undercurrent of socio-political commentary. It was a
Yeah.
really riveting book. It was like a good read for me because I'm always reading academic stuff.
Mm.
Leisurely reading, but at the same time, I'm like, she is going in, right? I'm like, this is a lot of stuff she's trying to tell y'all right now.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
the people who I know are the bad guys were the bad guys in the book, and it was just,
Yeah.
it was like, wow, you know. And it was funny because it's like a very hyperactive version of what we're living today, right? The
Hmm.
same kind of
Yes.
healthcare issues that we see today, and the same kind of isolation and segregation that we're seeing today. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, let's just blow that up, right?
Yeah.
And put it in this era that is completely out of what we would expect as the norm. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna scare the shit out of you because look how close it is to what we're living right now.
Right, exactly, exactly. And that's what, you know, I feel like good science fiction is all about. A friend of mine, Lamont, he's a hip hop artist here in Chicago. He
Mm-hmm.
was like, you know, and he wasn't talking about my book. He was talking about something else. I'm sure, I think it was science fiction, but he was like, people always get so, you know, like, wow, can you imagine this future? And it's like, yeah, actually, it's not too different. And that's kind of how I feel about Panther and the Hive. Is that it's not that different. It's just like you
Yeah.
said, hyperactive, exaggerated,
Yeah.
and really barely exaggerated. If you look
Right.
at, you know, some of the smaller pieces, barely
Right.
exaggerated, especially in
Right.
the discussions of Chicago and, you know, North Side, South Side, you know, in Chicago politics. Chicagoans, I think, will be all over that one.
That's my next question. Actually, was your decision to put it. I know you live there, but your decision to put it in Chicago and not just like on in one piece of Chicago. I mean, we're talking about the entire landscape of Chicago is played out
Yeah,
throughout the book. And
yeah,
you hit on everything. You hit on downtown, South Side, everything in between. Folks going to work, and I love their mode of transportation. By the way, in my mind, I had like because you kept describing the hum and the color, and I'm like,
mm,
I'm there. I can totally see that, right? And my question specifically about Chicago is knowing that it's highly segregated, knowing that there's a lot of violence, knowing that there's all this kind of corruption, politics, and whatnot.
yeah.
Did you feel like it was important that that be a conversation in the book? And if so, I'm wondering because I know that you're going to have a part two and a part three, correct?
Hmm.
It's going to leave Chicago. So then my
Hmm.
question is, was that your commentary on Chicago and the politics and the life in Chicago, or will that go with Tasha when she moves on? Is that something that's going to keep coming up? But I know she's not from there, but obviously
Yeah.
she loved the city. So then my question is, how does that play into the next couple of books?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it was conscious, for the first part, talking about I feel like we shouldn't talk about Chicago without talking about segregation and violence and
Right.
politics, to act like, oh, the Windy City is so great, summers, yay,
Yeah.
like you can't I cannot have that conversation without acknowledging, the things that are wrong with the city that, Rahm Emanuel and his, you know, brood of followers would, they
Hmm.
like to gloss over and make sound pretty. I don't approve of that, and I wouldn't approve of myself acting like, oh, she lives in Chicago and it's a great city until this. Like,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't a great. I mean, it's a beautiful city. It's great. There's things about it that she loves, but she can love it and also still acknowledge the problems with it, which is what I try to do. In the
Right.
book, it's I love Chicago. But then to answer your second question, on the second part, it will follow Tasha, as she leaves. You know, she's gonna be, oh, spoilers. Sorry, I'm like trying to choose my words very carefully so I don't say a spoiler. But I'm working with sequel now, and there are so many things that are just coming to me, scenery that she passes, and just, everywhere you look in American culture, there is something that you can, dissect and criticize for its
Mhm.
various, capitalistic, racist, sexist pieces. That's unfortunately what we've been built on. So it's everywhere. And she is learning that too, as
Mhm.
she's, changing landscapes and changing, environments. She sees that some things don't change.
Right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. So let's talk about the love interest, right? And the kind of lack thereof. Now, I've
Hmm.
I've heard you previously talk about Katniss and this whole thing where it's like she whoops ass, she's hardcore, she's wonderful, but oh, she can't decide is it him or is it him? And
Yeah.
I know how you're like, oh my gosh, does every single time we have a white female lead does she have to have this inner confliction about her love life? And
Yeah.
so when I was reading this book, I was like, I wonder how she gonna handle that. Like I was actually
Hmm.
waiting to see what you were going to do, and I
Uh-huh.
thought what you did was brilliant. I thought what you did was brilliant because in actuality, a lot of women of color have those types of relationships
Mhm.
with a lot of people that they're interested in. It's like, oh, there's this inner conflict. I got so much other stuff going on. I have a
Mhm.
stressful life. I got my own things to do, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and it's not a priority to have this love life. Like the love life is
Mhm.
not priority number one. And although it's
Yeah.
there and we may acknowledge it and it's something that we think is nice or he's cute,
Right.
but it's not like, okay, this is going to completely direct every single thing that I do from here on out. And
Mhm.
so my question with the love interest in the book is, well, obviously, number one, is it going to go further? Because I want to know. You have to tell me. But anyway, and then number two, is that something that you feel has to be done in a book like this, dealing with a strong female lead of color, where we have to kind of get away from these conversations about the frou-frou things, the love and this and that. If we're
Mhm.
talking about other things, are you are you kind of saying we don't have to always be talking about love lives as well?
Yeah. First question, does it go further? I'm not telling you.
Oh,
So sorry. But part two, that wasn't I did want to, be realistic with her in the way that, she has too much going on. There's too much going on, and I honestly, Katniss in the Hunger Games did a little bit of that where she was like, "Oh, I just can't deal with this right now. I'm trying to fight for my life," but she was still very much dealing with it, and
right,
most of the plot was, wrapped up in that. So Tasha really doesn't have time to deal with that. She's trying to save her ass. She's trying to
right,
save her friends. She's trying to just, keep it together. She wants to see her sister again. Those are her
right,
prime objectives,
right.
And then, the love interest, he's there and he's beautiful,
Hmm.
but it's it's like, well, that would be nice if
Yep.
all of these other things weren't going on, So I wanted it to be realistic for her, but I don't know if it's necessary. You know, I'm thinking about her as a woman of color, and
Hmm.
you know, I want her to have love because she wants it. You
Right.
know, and she should get what she wants. You
Right.
know, it's
Right.
there's too many women not getting what they want. You know, she
Right.
should get what she wants. But I also, you know, for her, like it's a journey like everything, you know, and I don't approve of the literary, you know, for any, you know, race of character, you know, just kind of like love getting dumped in their lap as part of the plot, and we're
Hmm.
going to bicycle
Hmm.
on through this, you know, with love in the basket because it just has to be there, you know. I wanted
Right.
her to be real, and, you know, regardless of her race, I wanted her to have it when she's ready, you know,
Right.
and not a moment before. I want her to have it on her terms. You know,
Right.
she wants it when she wants it, and she doesn't want it yet. She's not ready, or she would have made that
Right.
move. You know, so
Right.
it's like I feel like you know, in some books, you know, love is it's a touchy one for me because it's not something that I enjoy writing about. You know, the romantic aspect isn't something that I'm drawn to writing about.
Yeah.
But then he appeared in the story. He just kind of
Yeah.
ended up in the story, and I was like, he's here for a reason. You know,
Yeah.
he's here
Yeah.
for a reason, and I didn't want to take that opportunity from her. I didn't want her to be like, oh, this is going to be a strong black female character who is going to kick ass and take names, and she doesn't need
Yeah.
love. She doesn't need any of this because she wants love. You know,
Right.
she wants it. So I want her to have it all.
Right.
Basically, I think she should be able to have it all, and she will.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
Mm.
So this is the last question, and I was like not wanting to ask it, but
Oh
so
gosh.
no. It's actually it's a personal one for me. So actually, while I was reading the book, I lost my father, right?
I'm sorry, Jen. I
And
didn't know
it
that.
was, I know it's yeah, but it was crazy because right around the time when he got really sick, I started really getting into the parts that Tasha was dealing with her parents, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this has to be like this is God or something because I'm like literally reading through some of the deeper parts where she's really reflecting on her life with her parents was right when I lost my dad.
Hmm.
So in writing that into the story, right? So a lot of women of color, a lot of people obviously lose family members and so on and so forth. But the narrative of tragedy, I think, is very, very poignant for women of color, right? Because whereas in certain communities, you know, divorce is not as common, or homicide is not as common, or violence, or whatever it is. For women of color, a lot of those things are kind of a daily occurrence. People dying of
Hmm.
cancer, people having diabetes, people having heart attacks, women of color themselves being at higher risk for certain diseases and dying
Yeah.
early and from more extreme cases and being
Hmm.
sicker and having less access to healthcare and all that stuff. And that was exactly what happened with Tasha's parents in the book, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of us can really relate to that. So then my question for you is in dealing with the narrative of Tasha's parents, was your goal there, because you wrote it spectacularly. Like I was reading that, I'm like, did she lose someone? I mean,
Hmm.
it was like exactly what I was going through was the same stuff that she was kind of dealing with.
Yeah.
And so my question is, when you wrote that into the story, because you didn't have to, did you
Hmm.
write that into the story to, was it just to add character depth, or was it to do kind of what I felt, which was like, oh my gosh, she knows me, right? Like Tasha's like me because
Yeah.
you know a lot of women of color deal with this stuff very early on,
Yeah.
right? These conversations of tragedy, even if it's even if it's personal tragedy, you know, being high risk of domestic violence or
Hmm.
abuse, right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
all those narratives of tragedy are very, very poignant, I think, for women of color. So
Hmm.
explain kind of where you were, why you included that in the story.
You know, I didn't want to make her an orphan, but for the sake of the direction I saw her growth going, she needed, not that I wanted her to, but she needed to be isolated. You know, she needed to be alone. And, you know, as I have mentioned, you know, that so much of her is based on women that are very close to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, you know, her feelings of isolation, you know, she's cut off from her past, you know,
Right.
she and her people, and she doesn't know, you know, what to do, what to
Right.
do, and like why did she deserve this? Why is this happened to her? And it was intentional. You know, I wanted that grief to be very tangible. I wanted people to, you know, any reader to read this and feel her deep, deep loss,
Mhm.
because I feel that she has lost so much. And you know, she has lost everything she
Right.
could possibly lose. You know, she has
Right.
lost, and much of it was taken from her. You know,
Right.
and she doesn't have, you know, parents. She doesn't have a support system,
Right.
and I wanted her isolation not just to be on an individual level. You know, oh, this girl in Chicago, like she, as you mentioned, you know, so many women of color, you know, have these exact experiences. You know,
Mhm.
and I didn't want it to be, you know, oh, her parents are, you know, somewhere, or they're, you know, they died of old age. You know, I wanted it to be, you know, this is very real. This isn't
Right.
an accident. I actually just lost my uncle yesterday,
Oh, I'm
and
so sorry.
it, it's tough. You know, thank you. It's. I was just, you know, talking to my fiance. You know, he would have been,
Wait.
he might have been,
Pause.
but
When did he become fiance? Congratulations. I
thank
can just
you.
throw that in there.
I thought we talked about this. I'm sorry. Yeah, fiance
Congratulations.
now. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, we were talking, and you know, it's hard not to go through what ifs when you think about, you know, the loss of someone. And you know, one of the what ifs, you know, for my uncle was that, you know, if he hadn't been unemployed and if he hadn't not had health insurance when it mattered, you
Right.
know,
Right.
he might be alive today, you know, and that is such a stark reality, as you mentioned, especially for women of color. And,
Right.
you know, Tasha had her entire world pulled out from under her, you know, because of these institutions.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and there will be more about it in the sequel. There will be some, I think you will find it very interesting. um, but it's it's a crime. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted the reader to feel that it was a crime, and it
Right.
was.
Right.
Uh, Her isolation, her loneliness, her lack of family, her lack of insurance, her, you know, experience at her job, you know, with
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
racist boss, you know, that it is all a crime. And I
Yeah.
wanted the reader to feel it and feel her grief in every second. So,
Right.
yeah.
I yeah. You just brought up her job, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've had that boss. You know, like
Yes.
I've had that boss, and
Yeah.
it's just and that's why I'm really glad that you told this story. Like it was interesting to me reading it because you know a lot of people live these lives and don't realize, oh, I'm living this thing, right? This thing is happening to me right now, right? Because we're in it. But you step back and you look at it. Like reading this book, I stood back and I'm like, dang, I can relate to this girl. You know, like I can really relate to her. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of your readers are doing the exact same thing, and that's why I
Yeah.
mean this book is a gift. To me,
Yeah.
it's a gift. As a nerd who loves Halo, and you were talking about Halo all throughout the book,
Yeah.
and CeeLo, I'm like, okay, that's two of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, obviously you're a nerd because if you're interested, if you're saying that in a book, you're obviously a nerd.
Guilty. Yep.
But it was this hodgepodge of character traits that came together so seamlessly, and I think it reads that way for a lot of women of color who are looking at
Yeah.
this character and saying, "Finally, I'm in a book, right?
Yeah.
Finally, I'm mainstream, right?"
Yeah.
And I
One of
think,
the things that people always ask, you know, when they're trying to, like, you know, people like either in the business or in the industry who are like, so who is this book for? You know, who is this book for? So we know who to market it to. And it's like this book is for everyone, but it is
right,
especially for quirky black girls. You know,
right,
it is a book for quirky black girls. It stars a quirky black girl.
yeah,
And, you know, she rocks. You know,
yes,
she rocks.
he
So
does,
it's like I want I you say it's a gift. You know, it is a gift to hear it. You know
yeah.
that you relate to her and that you enjoyed her and that you know were down to go on the ride because you know that's all I want to hear. That's all I want to hear.
So I mean, I'm gonna wrap it up because I know you got to go, but I'm just really glad you wrote it. I mean, I'm like, and every time people see me with the book, because the cover is really striking, right? And
Yeah.
I obviously have more questions, so I'm just gonna have to ask you more questions at the next one. We have questions about the
Well,
Panther and and the big B. I'm like, oh, so much going on. But I have lots of questions about this stuff.
We can talk whenever. You know
By the
me.
way, that I was waiting to understand the whole Panther in the Hive concept, and the way you brought it together, I thought was genius. I thought that was brilliant.
It was the hardest title. Girl, it was so hard. I couldn't even. It was that was
worked.
the hardest part was the title. But I'm glad that you feel it came together. That makes
Oh
me.
yeah, it worked. It worked. So I'm just waiting for part 2 and part 3. I need to hurry up and finish writing them. We are all waiting with bated breath because it was absolutely stellar.
Oh, you make me happy.
So thank you for writing it, and thank you for interviewing with me.
Of course.
I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna make sure that I hook up with you as soon as I get to Chicago.
You know it.
I will be the 6'4" black woman, and you will be the height challenged white woman, and we're working on it.
I'm into it.
All right, thanks, Olivia.
All right, lady. Good night.
Bye.